alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest, CP Hoff. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
So I want you to introduce yourself, but we were, as people know, there's a little discussion goes on before the show because people have referred to that recently. Thanks a lot, Terry Shepard. But anyway, tell us a little. You had a thought you were going on about something.
Jeez, we're talking about books.
We were talking about books.
You read,
yes. Yeah, when you read.
When you read, sometimes you just have the first few words. They just are so alive. You can feel them. They're almost like music. You know, the way you feel them, the way you read them, and not every book is like that. And I think just like different people have different tastes in music, I think books that maybe come alive to me may not come alive to somebody else. So just because, a book comes alive to me, somebody else might think it's dull as dishwater and they want something that's, a little different than what I would like. But when I find a book that comes alive, the words are different in your head. They're different. Even when you're reading, they feel like, you almost feel like you can feel them on your tongue. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can practically.
Like you're saying them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, just reading them, even though you're not speaking them, it feels like it, and you want to feel the shape of them. It's just a different. It's hard to explain because it's such a personal experience. But you can go through book after book and you think, yeah, this is okay. But then when you hit something that really feels alive, ooh, you can't hardly put it down.
Yeah, I've been having trouble with that lately. Actually, my last. Well, and by lately, I mean basically my entire adult life. I have had, because I was an English major in college, I may have mentioned this before, but ever since I graduated, I didn't really like the books I read for my English major. Let me be clear here. I'm a fantasy fan, I'm a science fiction reader, right? And I really don't, but I haven't even been able to get into that stuff since for the most part, since I graduated with an English major. It's very, very difficult to be an author of any kind and get a degree in literature. Let me put it that way.
Just because you don't necessarily connect with the stuff that you have to use in your degree, is that what you mean?
Well, that was one of the things. It really did hit my reading taste pretty hard because I had to get used to reading books I didn't like, and I had to do that a lot. Because most of that degree is reading and then reporting on it.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what my taste is anymore when I read a book. I mean, I kind of know. I mean, I like funny books. I like scary books. I like horror a lot more than I thought I would. I never read that before before I really graduated from college. But yeah. The stuff I write, I always write fantasy and mix fantasy and science fiction stuff. And in those genres, it's been very hard. And maybe it's also because I've written, 20 or 30 books in those genres, or that kind of super genre of sci-fi fantasy. But I have a hard time reading a book in that genre and not being overly critical of it now. And that's kind of where I'm at as far as reading goes.
Yeah, that makes it hard. When you get to the point where you have some idea of the way plot works and how stories should be structured, then you read some stories and think, this is all narrative. Like you can't, you get these long lines of description and narrative and no scene and or just the odd sentence thrown in, and you think, well, I just wonder how it doesn't come alive when you do that narrative. And
no, yeah, for me sometimes it does, but I mean, obviously you said before we have different tastes.
Yes.
But I can get a magical feeling if I'm getting that sort of feeling really comes across to me sometimes when I'm getting kind of the zooming along in a character's life can be really fun. Like the beginning of like the first chapter of Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson was really good for that kind of vibe.
Was he able to carry it through the whole book, or you said
I have not been. This is the tricky thing about Neil Stephenson is I didn't actually finish the whole book because he's very difficult to read, and I actually can't stand him for very long. But I love the first chapter is like a short story, and so it's good on its own.
So why is he difficult to read?
Oh, because he constantly circles back. He's got a very obtuse writing style, at least in my opinion.
So he repeats himself.
He doesn't repeat himself. He spirals. He's constantly talking about different stuff, but it's always there's a ton of exposition, and it's going in a bunch of different directions, and that is the problem. But this first chapter, if you're doing exposition about a character, it's different to me. Whereas he's talking about all this stuff like code, like cryptography and stuff like that in this book. And, the politics of East Asia or something, stuff like whatever it is at that moment. He's going off on these like long kind of circular things that lose me after a time. And the beginning of that book is really good, though. I got to say, the beginning I really liked. I just lost the thread about, like 100 pages into the book. Or 2 hours into the audiobook, Yeah,
well, I think sometimes you read a book and about 3/4 of it you think, oh, and then you get to the last quarter and you think, did you get tired writing this book?
Yeah.
Yeah, you seem to you rushed it, or the heart has just,
yeah.
I don't know. It's come right out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to criticize Neil Stephenson. It's just not for me, but because a lot of people do like that book. But also that book's 1,000 pages long, like 40 hours long. It's huge.
Yeah. That's a big commitment.
Yeah, maybe it's only 20 hours, but it's a long book. And, it's not something I could get. And I've listened to the beginning, the few chapters several times, but I've never been able to get through the whole book. Anyway, that's not exactly a recommendation. But Connie, or CP, you have a new book out there in the world, right?
I do. It's different because it's a chapter book for adults. It's a chapter book for middle-aged women of a certain age, which there are no chapter books. So it's humor, but it's on some hard subjects to deal with. It's on abandonment, and there's some PTSD in it. It's a chapter book, so it runs along. If you liked, it's been compared to Adrian Mole. Have you read it? It's Sue Townsend wrote Adrian Mole.
Oh, okay. I've heard of Townsend, but I haven't read that book.
Oh, she was. It was in the 80s.
Okay.
She passed away quite a while ago. But whether someone who loved, that was just one person's opinion. I'm not sure how far-reaching that would be. If other people that loved Adrian Mole picked it up, how they would find it. I would be curious to find out. But I don't know how do you find readers that read a book, 40 years, not 40 years.
It came out 40 years ago, about 35 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so that's what it's about. It's a book of a little girl that was abandoned at the hospital by her parents.
Ah.
Yeah. And she's raised by a grandmother who had no idea her daughter was even pregnant. Her daughter was kind of in the late 60s, so her daughter was kind of a flower child, a little bit of a, running and not having a job and just, doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But, so that's what it's about.
Well, cool. That sounds interesting, but humorous, because it could be very heavy. That subject matter could be very heavy.
It is, and when you talk about such heavy subject matter, but you say yes, but it's supposed to be funny. But it's funny. People kind of can give you a gut double take, but there's a lot of humorous books that talk about hard things, but are still funny. Have you ever read Jenny Lawson? She writes nonfiction. Okay. She writes on mental health. She writes on her. She has so many diagnoses, but she is so funny. God, she's funny, and she's done so much good for so many people. But she's very honest about what it's like to live in her place and in herself as she tries to navigate all these as complications because of her mental health.
Yeah.
But it's very good. If you just have to, she has a book called it's Furiously Happy, and if you just listen to the introduction of it, when she's doing the introduction, she does like to swear, So it's a little bit, if you don't like swearing, she's not the gal for you. But just listen to how she does the introduction to it, and you'll realize it's the whole tone of the whole book. It is really, really well done. Even her introduction is hilarious.
Well, that kind of reminds me of some of the stuff I used to. I read actually one of the things I read for my English degree was David Sedaris.
I like him so much.
The Santaland Diaries was the one I read for one of my creative writing courses.
Did you like it?
Oh yeah, I love the Santaland Diaries.
Have you ever listened to him read?
I have actually listened to him read that whole, or a couple of the key parts of that piece.
Oh, there
were some recordings of it. Yeah,
he's got such a straight face. Like, he says such funny things with such a straight face, and it is. Yeah, I like him.
His timing is really good. His timing in this audio is really good.
Yeah, his timing's really good, and I like listening to read. Doesn't matter. But when he reads in front of an audience, it's that much sweeter. It's that much better.
Kind of like a live musician kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I think because you feed off the energy. I think it must be very different being in a studio and reading rather than having the response and the energy from the audience coming back to you. Yeah. When they laugh and stuff, I think it just makes. I just think it probably makes more of a performance than it would without an audience.
Yeah, it really does elevate it. It's kind of like, I mean, this isn't humorous, but it was early recording for sure, which is why I don't think there are recordings of him reading it when the way it should be read. Actually, that's one of the things I've heard is Allen Ginsberg howl.
No, I don't know that.
Allen Ginsberg was a beat poet. He was one of the big beat poets back in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, after World War II. And he wrote a bunch of, and he was a gay man, and it was a very rough time to be any kind of minority in this country, honestly, in America, and he was American, so. But there was a lot. But he wrote this big kind of long form poem about called Howl. And it's a great poem. Listen to it. There's a content warning there, though. Of course, it's kind of it was the subject of the obscenity trial that he was put on afterward, after writing it, because it's relatively frank with sexuality and stuff like that. So, consider it. There's some bad words in there by some standards, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's a really good poem. And there's recordings of him reading it, but he read it a lot of times because beat poets would perform their poetry, right? And by the time he was reading it for recording, he'd read it like 100 times because it was very popular, maybe more than that, a lot of times. And so he said, he says at the beginning of one of the recordings that I have of it is that, yeah, you're supposed to read this poem with like a great ecstatic verve, and he's like, but he's so tired of it because he's played this he's played this song 100 times or whatever. He's read this poem out loud so many times that he just can't muster it, but he tries. He gives it a go. Yeah,
I suppose it becomes he's tired of it.
Yeah, it gets old, Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember. Do you know the Anna Green Gable books? They were.
Yeah, I've heard of those. Yeah.
Okay. She hated those books by the time she finished writing them because that's the only thing people wanted from her. She wanted to move on. She wanted to write something else, but people wanted more Anne books, and so she ended up hating doing them.
Wow.
Which is sad because I think it's probably out of all her books, they are the most well known.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, it's like Sherlock Holmes as well. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle tried to kill off Sherlock Holmes because he was tired of the character.
Yeah, I understand that. It would be hard going to the same well over and over again. You want to move on, and the public isn't willing to let you.
Yeah, I love to bounce around in my own books, but I need to stick in my genre at least. I need to stick to fantasy or science fiction, so I've stuck with fantasy. But
what's harder to write, fantasy or science fiction?
Oh, they're both pretty easy for me. I don't know. I wouldn't consider either of them to be difficult.
I would just think the science would be so.
Well, the thing is, the thing about science fiction is I don't lean on the science. I lean on the fiction.
Okay.
So for me, it's not that different from writing fantasy. They're that's why I say they're kind of the same genre for me. That's how I grew up with them. That's how I've always read them. But I know a lot of people, the content is very important. So if you have a spaceship or a dragon, that's a big difference. You know, it isn't for me though. So they're kind of the same thing.
I was listening to a podcast today, and the name of the person eludes me, but he was talking about writing time travel. And he was talking about the science of it and how if he ate just before he time traveled, there had to be something with the way the food would. I don't know. I didn't understand. I thought if that's how hard it is to write time travel, you have to take all these variables in about the space that you leave and the compression of the air and the space that you come into and how that affects the air. I thought if it takes it, he was talking about stuff that I don't have a clue, and I thought if it takes that, I've never.
Well, the thing about time travel and teleportation is it's actually way more difficult than the alternative of not including something like that. I've never written a time travel story, but I also don't see the need to, because it's kind of it's a limiting factor more than it is an expanding factor for a story. Because once you have time travel, people are going to complain about it basically without fail, unless that's your genre.
Why do you think so?
Because time travel is widely considered to be one of the more fantastical science fiction concepts, right?
Oh.
And it results in kind of it becomes the center of every story that it's part of, basically.
It's your key character.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a key element that you have to work around everything else, because if you can undo parts of the story by time traveling, for example, then you have to explain why people don't, or you have to deal with people doing exactly that, and that makes the whole story about time travel after a certain point. Now, something like Harry Potter, the third Harry Potter book has a time travel subplot, but that becomes important at the end of the book, but it is one of the big things people complain about with the Harry Potter franchise. That whole series, there's a lot of people because it really works in that one book, but then it becomes like, how does that affect the universe? It's never explored thoroughly, which is actually generally the problem with most of the Harry Potter world building, is that carries through to just about every book of Harry Potter, is that, this thing exists, but we're never going to use it again, or if we use it again, it's going to work a little differently, or we're not going to really think about the implications of it.
I never even thought of it because I don't write in those genres, and I've never considered all the complications that would.
Yeah. Generally, my most ambitious concept, I think, is the one where it's urban fantasy, right? So it's our world, but then the urban fantasy element, the fantasy element is that we discover there is an afterlife. That's the concept I really want to play with. We discover there's an afterlife, and you can go back and forth between the two, and not just as a ghost or something. Like there's physical transportation between these two places, and that's where the magic. But then of course there's a whole complication there, and so it became more of a portal fantasy because it turns out that afterlife is pretty interesting. At least it was to me, the one I created, and it's an afterlife that nobody. It's not like you go to heaven or hell or any of that stuff. That stuff doesn't exist in this setting, presumably. But that's a very fraught area. That's why I've not released. I've taken down the books I released in this series, and I need to rework them heavily before I ever try releasing them again, because it's such a crazy concept. There's a lot of other and. I don't know. I'm off on a tangent here. Sorry. This is
No. I find this quite interesting.
Okay, so the concepts of some concepts are bigger than others is basically how I would say it. Things like there's an afterlife in our world. That's a concept of something that we can never know that in the real world. That's not something that can be factually proven or disproven, really. If it ever could be, it would change everything. Same with time travel. They're both huge setting elements. Just using those as examples.
Right.
And they change everything. No.
They could change everything, but you look at what's happening in the world right now, even with the pandemic, and the people that think COVID is a hoax, and the people that think COVID is not a hoax, and you can't convince the people that think it's a hoax that it's true. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's totally intransigent elements of our own world, right?
Right. So if someone proved that there was an afterlife, how many people would not believe them, because we can't even prove to people that there's a pandemic.
I guess that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, and that was basically what boiled down to my big problem with like Dan Brown books. Dan Brown, the thriller author.
Yeah.
And he kind of set me off writing fiction. He kind of set me off writing fiction because I didn't like his books very much when I was a kid. I read a bunch of them when I was like in 8th and 9th grade, and then I'm like, no, this is bad. I don't like this. I could do something better. And of course, I don't do anything like what he writes. I don't write that kind of book. But that's partially because I find that kind of book to be kind of not self-congratulatory, but a little bit fantastical in its own right. It's exploring our world, in theory, right? It's supposed to be there's all this like stuff about how these are supposed to be real places and stuff. These characters are going. These are real. He does research on it. It's not like he doesn't just make these places up. But then he does think. But then the way the world would react, like why would anyone need to keep secret, for example, that Jesus had children? Like why would that be a thing in the Da Vinci Code? Why? Because if it was a thing, granted, there's all sorts of things you can come up with why various people throughout history would want to do that. But then, if that ever came out in the modern world, it would not matter because no one would believe it.
No, they wouldn't.
It wouldn't change a thing.
Nope.
And so, what's the point of this book? People are getting killed left and right. This is a book. I mean, maybe not left and right. That book doesn't have that much murder in it, but. There's this action, there's this thriller, there's this high stakes, but what is the stakes really? They're not that high, physically speaking.
No, they aren't, because people, we have.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, that's okay. What were you saying?
No, it's a weird fact of like, the biggest idea isn't going to change the fact that what reality is to a lot of people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That is true. But have you, as you age, don't you look back at some of the things you thought when you were 20 and then you're embarrassed of your 20-year-old self?
Oh, all the time. I'm absolutely embarrassed by everything I thought when I was 20, just about.
Yeah, you think that person would get on my every last nerve, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I wonder if people who have taken certain sides in different, whatever the controversy is right now, if 10 years from now they'll not want to admit the stands they took, and you know what I mean?
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It could change the time, even when you consider the Second World War and how many people were in the French resistance and how many people claimed to be in the French resistance were two different things, because no one wanted to admit that they were informing on their neighbors or collaborating with the Nazis. So they were subtly in the French resistance. So I think that will happen with some of the things that are happening right now. People that believe in it so ardently that they would live and die on that right now, 10 years from now, well, I didn't really believe that. I was whatever. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I think that's an interesting idea in its own right. I mean, there's this history. History is its own story, and it's a bizarre set of stories, really. Yes. Because somebody writes that stuff down, and nobody is without a motivation when they write something down. Let me put it that way. Which is why I think fiction can sometimes tell a truer story than, or it can tell a story that's truer about the human condition if that's what you're trying to do.
Yes. Yeah, you're probably right there.
Because there's not as much. Because unless you're writing propaganda, like someone like Ayn Rand, or even say some or allegory like George Orwell, that's not necessary. If you're writing just a story and you're just trying to tell a story that's honest about the human condition, that would be that'd be its own set of. That would make its own kind of logic, and then it would stay perhaps be more timeless in a way.
Maybe, but it depends it's how you view the human condition, right?
I suppose. I guess that's true. There's no universal human condition, which is why there's no one meaning of life. That's like Viktor Frankl. Frankl. His book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? I've read that.
Yeah. So in this book, in this book, he points out that the meaning of life is a moving target, basically. You can't just You can't. But the thing that keeps you going. That's what meaning is.
Yes.
And some people helps you survive. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people you don't know what keeps them going because their life has been pretty difficult. Some people have had a harder time than others. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we are running a little low on time for this podcast. It's been very interesting. I hope people have enjoyed this because it's a little different. I did most of the talking, and I'm kind of ashamed of myself to some degree for not letting the guests talk. But CP Hoff, let people know what you've been reading lately, if you can.
Oh, geez Louise. You told me to look that up, and I didn't get it. I didn't find it. It happened too fast.
I'm sorry about that.
No,
Just kind of sprung the podcast on you.
That's okay. I need to write it down because on the spur of the moment, everything just. I'm of the age where I can't remember. I did do David Sedaris, Naked. I just finished listening to that one. Have you listened to that one?
No, I haven't. I need to listen to more David Sedaris. I've not listened to any of his whole books, just his short stuff.
Oh, it is so very, very good. You would like it.
I think I would. I think I should give that a shot. Yeah.
Yeah, I just listened to that one, and that was really good.
Well, as for me, I'll just say what I'm saying first. You can keep looking that up.
Okay.
So as for me, I have been reading a little bit here and there, but I've been reading a little bit of Joe Lawler's Free Ranch, he's an indie author. This is a steampunk story, kind of steampunk fantasy setting. I don't think it's not like Victorian England or anything. It's a fantasy world, but they've got airships and steam technology and stuff. It's pretty fun. I just started that, and I've been reading some H.P. Lovecraft short stories, just to brush up on the old horror side of it, the old cosmic horror stuff. Even though, content warning on Lovecraft. If you're triggered by racism, don't read it. He was pretty racist, and it shows in his writing. Though actually, I can recommend The Outsider. That story doesn't have any racism. It's just
that's an old one. The Outsider, The Outsiders.
No, The Outsider. It's a short story by H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay.
It's like 10 pages long. It's really good though. If you can get through the writing style, which can be a bit obtuse because it's so old. It's like 30s. Yeah,
they're different. They're different. I read two ones by a Canadian author, Brenda Chapman, and it was Butterfly Kills and Cold Morning, and they take place in Ontario, and she's a detective from I can't remember which reserve she comes from, but she talks about just the different cultures, how you come to work in a police department in a larger setting, and how different it is from the way it is out from being up north in northern Ontario, where she came from. But it's really good. I like the voice. I like how she resolves things and how her characters interact. It feels good. It feels good. I really, really enjoyed it.
Cool. Excellent. Does that one have that magical feeling for you? Did that one get the magic going? Okay.
It does. But it took me a while because the voice is different than I'm used to reading because of the fact that it's slightly different. It's because it's different culturally, right? Mm-hmm. And so the word choices and the rhythm of the sentences were different. Okay. Just the way it was read. I listened to an audio, and I think it was just the rhythm was just a little different, but it was so good. It was really, really good. It gives you, when you read books that can give you a different understanding how people that are different from yourself think, and it just makes you more accepting, I think, as a human being, and you don't see your differences so much. You see your similarities more. I think it's good.
That's a beautiful sentiment too. That's a beautiful sentiment. I love that. I love the, you just, read things that aren't like you. Read characters that aren't like you. Yeah. Read things that are written in a way that's a little bit off, a little bit unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. Read things that make you want to stand up for somebody that you don't understand because you understand them better because you read something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I get it. I think the audience is going to get it too. But yeah, we are out of time. CP Hoff,
Okay.
tell us a little bit, a bit about your book. Where can people find your book, and what is it called again?
It's called Canterbury Tales, and you can get on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, and Apple. But it's hard to find. Sometimes, have you ever tried to Google somebody's name on Amazon and you can't find it anywhere?
Yes.
And you know it's there? So if you go to my website and then you click on the Amazon link, it's a little bit easier. My website is cphoff.com.
Easy. Yeah. What is that? 6 letters? That's nice.
Yeah, easy. But yeah.
Not like my website, but yeah. Anyway.
What's your website?
timniederwriter.com.
Yeah, your name's a bit longer than mine.
Yeah, my name's a little long.
Yeah, mine's Hoff, Hoff. It's pretty short.
All right. Thanks for being on the show, CP. It's been great.
It's been really nice talking to you again.
It's always nice to talk to you. Yes. And people can find more about this podcast at mentalcellularpublications.com or timniederwriter.com, which I just said. And you can find my books on amazon.com. As of right now, Tenlyres is going to be free for good in June. But right now, Tenlyres, it's a big old fantasy novel. It's free for a few more days when this drops. So, yeah, because this comes out on Sunday. Pick it up quickly because otherwise you're going to have to wait a month to get it for free. But anyway, Kindle Unlimited is a harsh mistress. Anyway, so thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon.